Okay, it's 4:30. I will go ahead and call the special meeting of the Camarillo City Council to order and ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Kildee.
Here.
Councilmember Santangelo.
Here.
Councilmember Tremblay.
Here.
Vice Mayor Molche. Don't believe he's here. Oh, there he is. Vice Mayor Molche. We'll wait a minute. Vice Mayor Molche.
Yes.
And Mayor Craven.
Here. The purpose of this special meeting is a closed session. The first item is, or the next item is public comments on the closed session item only, and this item is conference with labor negotiators. I see 3 attendees. If any of the attendees would like to make a public comment on this item, please raise your hand. I see no hands being raised. So we will go on to asking the city manager to please tell us the conditions under which we can go into closed session.
I think you may have meant the city attorney, Mayor.
I meant the city attorney. I apologize.
Yeah, it's okay. Sorry, I
I
thought
don't know if that
maybe I
was
got
a
a promotion.
promotion or a demotion.
Well, I would consider it a promotion, but he might think otherwise. On to business. It'll be a conference with labor negotiators. The authority is Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency representatives are listed in the agenda, and it is with unrepresented employees, namely the city employees.
Okay, with that, we will recess into a closed session. We will come back into open session for the regular meeting at 5 o'clock.
So, okay. All right, it's 5 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Camarillo Sanitary District, the regular meeting of February 10, 2021, to order. Madam Clerk, let the record reflect that all 5 directors are present. Would you please all join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. Do we have any amendments to the agenda this evening?
No amendments.
All right. And I'm looking to see whether or not we might have any public comments. And I do not see, Madam Clerk, any public comments with respect to matters on the agenda.
That's correct.
All right, so we'll move on and inquire about the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion on the consent calendar?
I'll move the approval.
Second,
All right, a motion by Kildee, a second by Craven. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Craven,
yes.
Director Kildee,
Yes.
Director Mulchay,
Yes.
Secretary Santangelo,
Yes.
Chair Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now go ahead and at this point recess to the mid-year budget report. We will recess that for a joint item with the City Council.
And I will call this meeting of the Camarillo Successor Agency special meeting to order. Ask the record to reflect that all council members are present. Are there any amendments to this agenda?
No amendments.
Public comments. If any member of the public would like to speak to the successor agency on an item that is on the agenda or not on the agenda, would you please raise your hand? Let me go through this. I see no hands raised. Whoops. No, I see no hands raised. So we will go on to the consent calendar.
I'll move the approval. I'll
Is there a
second.
second? Mr.
I'll second.
Mulchay seconded. Mr. Kildee made the motion. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mulchay,
Yes.
Mayor Craven.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
Comments from staff?
No comments.
Comments from council members? There being no further business, we will adjourn. I'm not sure why I look like Adolfo Camarillo here. That gets us to the city council meeting. I'll call the city council meeting to order and ask the record to reflect that all council members are present. Are there any amendments to this agenda?
No amendments.
Okay, we're down to the consent calendar.
I'll move the approval.
Go ahead, Susan. I'll second.
Motion by Council Member Santangelo, second by Council Member Kildee. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mulchay,
Yes.
Mayor Craven.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay. I will now allow or ask Mr. Tremblay to reopen the CAMSAN meeting.
The record should reflect that we're reopening the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Camarillo Sanitary District, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And the next item on the agenda is a joint item between the City Council and the Camarillo Sanitary District Board. Under Finance is the mid-year budget report. Could we have the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, members of the sanitary board, I'm going to go ahead and share a screen now for a brief PowerPoint presentation. Are you able to see this? Okay.
Yes,
Very good. So as part of the mid-year process, we look at the budget after 6 months of the fiscal year to see if there's any changes in conditions that we may need to reflect in our budget. So bottom line overall is positive. We're going to be talking through some details of what that means and talking specifically about budgeting in a pandemic. And then we'll be looking at the revenue and expenditure mid-year trends and recommended adjustments. And then we'll also have an update on the CIP projects. So budgeting in a pandemic, we're still very much in a period of monitoring the unpredictable pandemic. Looking at the last 3 quarters, in March through April was where we had the total economic shutdown. Then in May through June, we started to have some limited reopenings. And in July through September, we had more phased reopenings, and we started to see a very sharp recovery curve as things were looking better. And that was when we got to our first quarter review back in mid-October. And then what happened in October through December, we had this extremely huge surge in the daily cases of the virus, starting at about Halloween and continuing upwards towards the end of December. We had the tier system that was announced just before our first quarter review, where we were in hopes of moving from a red tier to an orange tier as things started to look like they were improving. Then things really went downhill with the surge in cases. And we had another second regional stay-at-home order right here towards the beginning of December. So that really kind of changed our outlook on the year as far as the recovery. So in late January, another turn to the positive is that the number of new cases started to stabilize. The stay-at-home order was lifted, and we went back to the state color-coded tier system for reopening. So it was almost a reset now to get back to the gradual economic recovery, and expected that that's going to restart. So that's an example of how we're kind of dealing with the ever-changing trends and course of this pandemic. So in budgeting for a pandemic, we talked about some of the surprises, and most of these are repeats from the first quarter review. We said that online sales transactions increased, and they were expected to partially offset anticipated reductions from the brick and mortar retail. The building and construction activity remained strong. Business tax applications and renewals were steady, and we received some significant COVID-19 relief funding. So all of those were unexpected when we entered into the budget adoption. And now, when we started to see at the end of the first quarter some positive signs of recovery, we got hit with the surge. So that was the last surprise then, an extreme surge in cases and another stay-at-home order. So now what we're looking at is the impacts on the general fund. And we had experienced several one-time adjustments that are resulting in an anticipated general fund surplus of $2.2 million by the end of this fiscal year. And by the term surplus, we mean general fund revenues expected to exceed general fund expenditures by the amount of $2.2 million. Some examples of those one-time adjustments are the CARES Act relief funding was $1.3 million. We had some significant library contract savings, about $900,000. And that's due to the restricted operations, the level that the library was not able to operate at full capacity. So we experienced some savings through the contract. Then on the sheriff contract side, completely unrelated to COVID, there was a one-time reduction of $583,000. That was as a result of the Ventura County pension system adjustment. So again, no relation to COVID pandemic. It was just another one-time adjustment that we became aware of. And then the last point there, we had some staff vacancy savings throughout the fiscal year and projected out to end the fiscal year of a total savings for this fiscal year on savings of $595,000. So wanted to touch on this slide with the 3 major revenues that are impacted by the pandemic or thought to be impacted by the pandemic, with property tax being one of the 2 largest revenues to the general fund. It's not really significantly impacted by the pandemic, the secured property tax values. Now, we do have in our materials the downward adjustment recommended on the unsecured property value side of things. And to clarify that, the secured property values are houses, land and buildings, by far the largest portion of our property tax. And that's not being affected by the pandemic because the values are already set July 1. And the pandemic, we've experienced another sort of unexpected trend was that the housing market just really went off for the first 6 months of the year and continued to stay strong. And how that impacts our property taxes are that whenever there's a change in ownership, the property value assessments at the county get reset. So you may have a property that someone has owned for 30 years, and they may have a very low base value as far as the assessment with the county assessor. Then when they sell the property, it gets reassessed at the selling price, which tends to be much higher than the original base value. So that's how it translates into property tax revenues. And that's why we're suggesting that the secured property tax values were not impacted by the pandemic. And that had not been factored into our budget. I'm sorry, that was factored into our budget, the fact that it was not expected to be impacted. So another way to say that, in our budget, we did not have to adjust for the pandemic as far as the property tax revenues go. But now separately, we'll see it on the next slide, a downward adjustment on the unsecured property tax values. Those tend to be large equipment in most cases, unsecured property value, the smaller portion of our property tax revenue. And in this instance, it was related to large value aircraft, high value large aircraft that were relocated out of the city of Camarillo. So that unsecured property value now is not counted into our property tax revenue. On the sales tax side, as I indicated earlier, that really the increase in online sales helped offset any reduced revenues that we anticipated in our current budget. So with that information, we are suggesting an upward adjustment to our budget to reflect that we believe that the online sales are going to help offset what we originally anticipated to be reductions in sales tax. And we have 1 quarter of data on the sales tax side. We expect to get the 2nd quarter of data, that being the quarter from October through December, or the holiday quarter. We expect to get that actual data in April. On the transient occupancy side, that's the other large revenue that is very much impacted by the pandemic. The stay-at-home orders, the limited travel, the surge in cases really pushed out the anticipated recovery. In our original budget, we thought we would recover gradually, but the surge really set us back there on that anticipated recovery timeframe. So a downward adjustment is recommended there. And in the next slide, we'll get to some numbers. So here's the general fund revenues. Looking at the larger ones, the property tax, sales tax, franchise fees, and transient occupancy tax. Property tax we talked about, and that a downward adjustment of $237,000 is related to the high value aircraft that had relocated. The sales tax, we're suggesting a recommended adjustment of an additional $400,000 to the budget projection of revenue for sales tax, again, largely related to the online sales activity that we've seen through the 1st quarter. On the franchise fee side, the franchise fees, we had originally anticipated a reduction, but we're finding out they're not significantly impacted by the pandemic. And the franchise fees cover such utilities as gas, electric, cable, and refuse. So 4 types of operations and services that are really largely unaffected, maybe to some extent even higher with people staying at home and generating more trash or using electricity or cable more. So that one, we're suggesting an upward adjustment of $318,000. On the transient occupancy tax side, as I mentioned, that one with the surge in virus cases, we are expecting to now be less than what we originally anticipated, by the tune of $300,000 as a downward adjustment to our projection for the fiscal year. On the business tax side, that continues to be steady and comparable to the prior year. So that adjustment upward of $257,000 brings us close to in line of where we ended last fiscal year.
I ask a question on that, Madam Mayor?
Mr. Kildee?
Yeah, Mark, so that business tax Could you also glean out of those numbers that people actually opened businesses during the pandemic? Or do we have enough data to really decipher how we got there?
Yes, good question. It is a combination. There are some new businesses that opened during the first 6 months of the fiscal year.
Thank
That development services revenue, relatively small amount, that was a reduction due to some timing of projects. Those are some development fees. Some projects got pushed out, so a minor adjustment there. And then that last number, the other revenue sources, that large number, 1.3 million, is a positive adjustment to the revenue. That is the CARES Act money from both the state and the county. Any questions there? I'll pause on after we got through the general fund revenues, and we'll next move into the general fund expenditures.
Questions?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Tremblay?
Mark, going back on the property tax and the relocation of the high-value aircraft, do we know why there was a relocation? Is that indicative of some trend at Camarillo Airport, or what's the story?
We don't have details on the reason for relocation. We could only speculate, I believe, at this point. But I think what we are doing moving forward into the next budget year is trying to see, working with our consultants to see if there's any way we can develop a projection or somehow predict the movement of aircraft. And we will be looking into what specific aircraft these were, if it's possible to tell, and to see if we can find some underlying reason of why they relocated. See if we can link that to our next year's projections.
Madam Mayor, just to follow up,
Certainly.
we try from a different angle, Mark. Do we have any idea of the numbers of aircraft that have relocated relatively?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I do believe we have that information from our consultants, so I can follow up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, you're not on my screen. The others
Oh, okay.
are.
Sorry.
I'm sorry for not seeing that. Vice Mayor Malche?
No worries. Mark, even with, we have not received Q2 for the calendar year, that'd be Q4, but that would include the holiday sales season, the sales tax reports yet. Is that true? We haven't seen those yet? Okay. Even with not having seen those, you guys are still confident of increasing the sales tax adjustment?
Yes, yes, and this is one area where we continue to work with the consultants, and really once we receive that data from the second quarter of the fiscal year, I'll use the term the holiday quarter, which tends to be our largest quarter. That's the months of October, November, and December. Once we get that, we'll have a much better feel for whether or not these projections are still holding true.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay,
Okay, now we'll move forward onto the expenditure side. I'll touch on some of these expenditures. I won't go through each one, but some of the larger ones are, well, with the city council, the 33,000, that was related to a cancellation of some special recognition events. The two here, 114,000 for finance, 102,000 for community development. Those are related to vacancies. I think overall the vacancies citywide were about $585,000, I believe, total for the fiscal year. And the two right here on these two lines are in the finance and community development departments. On the police line item, this 711,000 is a combination. I mentioned earlier the decrease in the contract due to the county's adjustment to their retirement system. And that was a $583,000 number. The remainder of it, to bring it to 711,000, is vacancies. And those vacancies are on the staff level. That's not part of the sheriff personnel vacancies. We include our crossing guard positions in that line item. We tend to call it public safety. So the crossing guard services do get included in that budget line. So that's why we see those as a combined number. This continues on to the other departments within the general fund. And this public works line that we're recommending an increase to that line of $102,000. And that is related to contractual services, higher than expected level of activity. That's on inspections and plan checking services. Then we'll skip down to the library operations. This is the number that I mentioned previously, and that library contract savings as a result of the limited operations of the library was about $900,000. There were also some vacancies in that department that are reflected there to increase to a total of $1,024,000 as a downward adjustment or savings. And the economic development line, that was a combination of unused funds from the business grant program and the safety reimbursement program, or the barricade program that the city offered. Those were funds that did not get expended, so they're returned back to the fund balance. And then down here, let's not forget this line with the transfers. That is an increase of $600,000. That's two-part. One is to cover losses over on the Camarillo Events Fund. That's a separate enterprise fund that was set up for the ranch facility. And because there are no events being held, we had budgeted for some revenue from events that are not able to take place. So there's a loss of revenue while the operations still continue to maintain and keep the facility running. There is still a cost that needs to be covered. So the general fund would have to transfer about $363,000 to that enterprise fund to cover the cost. The other part of that is a new CIP project, a storm drain infrastructure repair project. That's approximately $250,000. So with those two transfers out, there will be a recommended adjustment of that $600,000 figure. So I'll pause there for any questions. That completes the general fund review, revenues and expenditures. And next we will be moving on to some of the other funds.
Are there any questions?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Tremblay?
Yeah, Mark, one question. On the public works side, where there's an increase primarily related to increases for contractual services, is that consistent with what you told us before about the increase in business tax revenues because of increased contractor activity?
I would say yes, it is related because there is still an increased level of activity, development activity, building activity. We kind of see that throughout when we pass by Home Depot and we see all the people in the parking lot. But that is one of the trends in this pandemic that was not anticipated.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Mayor.
Miss Santangelo?
Mark, under the economic development, 326,000 unused from the grant and the safety program. And I know that the safety program was only 250,000. Does that mean that some of our grant money went unclaimed or I thought at one point we had exhausted the whole amount.
There was some amount that was not fully expended through the grant program and got returned. We received a check back from the agency.
Was that because they had received other grants? And we reserved our money for people who had not received other grants?
I believe that was part of it. There was a competing grant program that some folks were taking advantage of.
Okay. Thanks. That's all I have.
Any other questions?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Mulchay?
Mark, to piggyback on Mr. Tremblay's question, just for, I think phrasing it another way, the $102,000 in increase in expenses in public works is being offset with anticipated increases in revenue as well, right?
There are to some extent, it's not an exact one-for-one match, but there are some inspection activities. So typically it's the overtime inspections that we are able to be reimbursed from developers.
Okay. And to shine more light, it was my understanding in terms of some of the money being returned from the economic development grant program. I know that we had originally we had about 400, I'm going to rough numbers, 480 businesses that were originally who had applied and were eligible. You'll remember that the issues with the BCCF and the county in terms of public disclosure of the names of the awardees. that same thing applied. Businesses were told that there would be proper disclosures of grant awards. And we ended up only about 400, I think it was 417 or around 420 ultimately ended up taking the grant. And some had just chosen to opt out. Other ones, I know some had said that they actually didn't need it and they preferred not to accept the money if they didn't truly need it, which is really honorable and honest on their part. So I know there was, I think the reasons were multiple, they were varied amongst them, but I think about 50 or so opted out ultimately.
Yes.
Thanks, Sean.
Any other questions? Okay,
Okay, moving on from the general fund to the other funds. This is the Lighting and Landscape Maintenance District Fund. And we are recommending an adjustment of $100,000, an increase in expenditures. That's an increase due to various unanticipated repairs to guardrails, bollards, light poles, and lights. The Capital Improvement Projects Fund is where we account for all of the major projects in the city, separate from water and sewer projects, because those have their own funds, but typically street projects and things of that nature. We are recommending to increase this fund expenditures by about $250,000. That's to reflect the addition of the storm drain infrastructure repair project. And the project is being funded by a transfer in from general fund that I mentioned previously. On the solid waste fund, we have a recommended decrease of $85,000, and that is due to the city's emergency order that waives late payment penalties due to the pandemic. So we had budgeted for approximately $85,000. Is a historical trend in that revenue line for penalties at that level. And because we are not charging them at this time, we show that revenue being reduced. In the transit fund, just thought I'd show this one, even though we are not recommending any changes to the budget. We did want to show that this money coming in is the CARES Act money related to transit, $3.1 million to just about fully offset the expenditures in the fund. On the revenues, on the water operation side, the revenues, there are no adjustments recommended. On the expense side of water, a small recommended decrease, $80,000. That's recommended due to decreases in water meters purchased and valve adjustments. The required level of purchases is trending a little bit lower than anticipated, so we see a little bit of savings there. Moving over to the Camarillo Sanitary District funds, the revenues, we show an increase in capital improvement fees, $1.5 million. That's recommended to reflect the current year trend for two developments. Capital improvement fees are calculated by developments coming into the city and tying into the city's sewer infrastructure. And there's a cost involved, and there's a calculation of fees established to allow for new developments to access the city's infrastructure. And the rest of the expenditures, we don't have any other adjustments on the expenditure side. Now, with some of the other funds, we do have a revenue increase of $226,000 recommended for the TDA Article 8 fund. We have appropriations from VCTC as a result of the state's budget, and they inform us periodically of whenever those estimates change. Typically, it's at the state budget level. And you'll see later that that number is even further increased as of last week. It's something that came to light after the preparation of these documents, but I'll touch on that a little bit later. The revenue decrease of $1 million in the traffic mitigation fund, that is also development related fees, and it's to reflect the trends for two of the projects, Cam Village Homes and the Ran Rancho projects. One of those being just a timing concern, where the project expected to happen, or the revenue related to the project expected to happen in this fiscal year, is now going to happen into next fiscal year. So it's just a change. Reduce the revenue this fiscal year, but it will be coming next fiscal year. Under the risk management fund, the adjustment to the expenditures is an increase of $173,000. That risk management fund is where we account for all of our insurance premiums. And we pay the insurance premiums in July. So this reflects what we've already paid. So it's just bringing the budget to match what we've already expended. The last bullet there, a revenue decrease of $363,000 in the Camarillo Ranch Events Fund. I touched on briefly, that's because the pandemic related restrictions on social gatherings did not allow events to happen that would normally generate revenue to that fund. Then we have some other requests and potential adjustments. These are items that are additional requests as they came in a little bit late after we had already prepared the documents and the agenda materials. Some of these came in or were in discussion and were not built into the adjustments that you see in your agenda packet. But the first one being the Camarillo Healthcare District and Transportation Services, there was a request for $57,000 that was not part of the original budget. And I believe we have a representative available to make some comments or answer questions.
Yes, I see Kara Ralston is one of the attendees. And she's being promoted to a panelist. So Kara, when you're promoted,
Hi, thank
you
you.
have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Craven, Vice Mayor, Council members, staff. What we're talking about with this request is what everyone probably else is talking about, the anticipated recovery setback on the fare box revenue for the caravan service. What we've experienced obviously is the loss of the fare box revenues from March of 2020 to that end of June 30 fiscal year, the July 1 start of the next fiscal year through December, and now already again with January and February. When we look at the budget, and just for reference, the 2018-19, the ending June 30 of 2019 budget is the same that we have been successful with. So this is a successful fare box budget, but it completely got destroyed again by the setback by the new stay-at-home order and then the new surge. We just haven't been able to. So what we calculate is about a $3,560 revenue, fare box revenue loss each month. And what we've done is the math from March to December, and then the continued projected loss from January through the end of this fiscal year. And it adds up, if we did all the dollars and pennies, to $57,000. What we want to do with that is something that we've never been able to do before. If that fare box revenue could be funded through this request, we would be able to transport some of the more frail, because that's what our transport service is. It's a niche service for the people who really need to have wheelchair lift and some more significant assistance with getting in and out. We'd be able to take them to the testing sites in Camarillo and the vaccination sites that are going to start up in Camarillo. We would be able to do that without charging them the fare box rate. We would just be able to subsidize that. And that's what we'd be willing to do. Kind of would be beautiful to be able to do that for the community during this time. And that's the extent of the ask. There's just nothing more to it other than this is revenue loss from COVID, and special districts were not included in the first round of CARES Act funding. And so we have no recovery opportunity. And
as I understand it, they are considering special districts in the current round.
yes. Yes.
And if so, that might change your request for the end of the year. We don't know what they're going to pass. We just know what's in there now.
Correct. We don't know what might pass, and we don't know when it might pass.
Okay, any questions by council members? Okay, seeing none. This really wasn't in the agenda report and wasn't on the indicated we were going to make a decision on this. I'm not sure. I guess the city attorney would be the one to ask. Can we talk about, can we make a decision on this specific thing tonight?
No,
So we'll have to talk about it at a later meeting, Kara.
Let me know if you need anything.
I'm sure staff will.
Yeah, Mark.
Yes.
Okay, let's go
Okay.
on.
So the second bullet there was the additional adjustment. This one I briefly mentioned earlier, the TDA Article 8 funds, and that was a notification. There was a meeting, I believe it was last week, with BCTC that the projections of the TDA money to the city of Camarillo increased another amount of 568,000. So I think when we see the recommended action, that will be on a separate line that we'll get to on the last slide of this presentation. I'll go over that method. And then we've got a couple of other potential adjustments. These are just things that we're continuing to monitor. We just did not have enough information at this time to make a recommended adjustment at the mid-year point. We will have another shot at adjusting the budget when we come back to the third quarter review, which will be in April. The first one being increases to purchase water costs. The desalter project involves a shutdown of wells A and B. They're going to go offline for some period of time to be updated and some work being done. So that's likely going to result in the need for more purchased water. We cannot pump water as those wells are going to be offline. So we're going to need to replace that with imported water. And there's a purchased water cost associated with that we will have to increase. So once we've got a dollar figure calculated for that amount, we will come back and recommend an adjustment to the budget to reflect that. The opportunity to reinstate community service grant program funding. I'd like to come back to that one in a second because we do want to have a little bit of discussion on that one. This last one, the additional 1.0 million in CMAQ funding available. CMAQ is a grant. That's the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program. It's a grant for CIP projects that is available for the Pleasant Valley bike lanes. So what we do with grants is we do not budget for them until we've gotten approval, grant approval from the granting agency, and reflect which period we believe that the project expenditures are going to happen so that we match the project expenditures with the project grant revenue. So that one we're continuing to monitor, and we may see something either towards the end of this fiscal year or into next fiscal year. So back to the opportunity to reinstate community service grant program funding. If you recall, our annual community service grant program starts off in the previous fiscal year. These monies that were budgeted in this current fiscal year were awarded by council back in March of 2020, but they were for expenditures for different organizations in this current fiscal year. And with the pandemic that came about in the end of March and through April and May, we had to make some difficult budget decisions, and one of them was to suspend that program. Now, recall that the awards had already been made. The organizations had already gone through a process of submitting applications, having discussion, and having an award of amounts for their programs. It got suspended. So now here we are at the mid-year point of the fiscal year, looking like we may have some positive money, a positive bottom line or surplus. So we wanted to have a little bit of discussion to see if council felt they wanted to direct staff to consider going back to these organizations and seeing if we still wanted to reinstate that funding. Now, what we'd have to consider is that some of these programs may have already happened. We're halfway through the fiscal year, so the time may have passed. But what staff is going to suggest is if council was okay with staff working with these different organizations that had already been granted funds, working with them to see if we could find a suitable purpose that is still within the the intent of the policy, the spirit of the policy, to provide these organizations with some assistance. Then staff would go and work with these organizations to see what they could use the money for. And if that is something that council would like to consider, one further recommendation we would have is that council could possibly delegate that task to the finance committee, where there's only 2 council members, and we work with the finance committee and staff to work with these organizations to come up with some solution to granting some of the money.
Before we start a question or discussion on this, I'm going to ask the city attorney the same question I asked on the healthcare district one. This is on here. It was not in the packet. It wasn't told to the public that we were going to be talking about it. Can we continue a discussion?
Well, I'm looking at what the agenda does say, and the suggested action is approve the fiscal year 2021 mid-year budget report and authorize the city manager to adjust the budget and make the necessary appropriations. So
Does that involve the adjustments that were in the packet or anything? I mean, I'm just wondering.
it's adjustments to the budget. And so if it's in the budget.
These were actually cut from the budget, were they not?
Correct.
So they're not in the budget. He's asking us to reinstate them for something that's not in the budget document.
Well, it does say adjust the budget. So if it's not in the budget, I think you make a good point, Mayor, that you're not really adjusting something that doesn't exist already in the budget. So this would probably have to be brought back.
This is in the same category as the request from the healthcare district.
Yeah, yes, it would be.
Okay, so you'll bring that back to us for some kind of a discussion?
Yes.
Your Honor, can we ask a question on this at this particular point?
Yeah, my answer on that is yes. I think you can ask a question to the extent that it would be related to a future budget item, but you could not take action on it.
Okay,
I think
do
what
have
we're
a,
looking-
Mr.
What we were
Kildee,
looking for from staff was just to get a feel for some direction, which direction the council wanted to go so that we could bring something back and what kind of a format we could bring that back at a later time.
well, I don't think we can give you a direction as to yes or no, as where I think the attorney's telling us, but let's ask Mr. Kildee for his question.
I have a question. When and if this does come back, will a dollar figure also be accompanied with this potential request?
Yes, we're suggesting that it would be the same dollar figure that was awarded back in March of 2020, and that total is about $65,000.
Okay, and then will we be able to know whether or not any state or county or local monies were awarded to these organizations during the pandemic?
If that is information that the council would like to have, we would have to explore that and work with the agencies to determine if any have been received.
That'd be good. Any other questions?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Tremblay.
I had my hand raised on Zoom.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I probably surprised you. Just on the 2 questions, if I might. As it pertains to our past and existing budgets, with respect to community service grants, program funding, what, Mark, is the source of funding typically that the city uses?
General fund money?
Okay. And secondly, Madam Mayor, can I go back and ask Mark a question on Sand District funds?
Certainly.
Mark, it's back a slide or 2, but on big page 13, on the Sand District funds, staff report indicated an increase of 1.5 million in revenues recommended to reflect current development trends for 2 developments, and a note in there is Camarillo Village Homes. But then with respect to special revenue funds and the traffic mitigation fund, it's a revenue decrease of $1 million to reflect current development trends. Can you help me reconcile those 2?
Yes. With respect to the sanitary district side, it was an estimate calculated for a development based on assumption of 3/4 inch meters. And when the development got to the final stages, there were more larger meters that translated into larger fees.
Did we go to, for example, did we go to 1 or 2 inch meters? Was that it?
I believe it was a combination, some of each.
Okay, and then conversely, for the traffic mitigation fund, was it because it was extended? That was, I'm gonna put the that building was extended, or that anticipated building was extended out?
On the traffic mitigation side,
Right.
part of it was a timing pushed out into the next fiscal year.
You mean relative to anticipated construction?
Relative to anticipated receipt of the fees. Now I'm not as clear as whether it's prior to construction, at the same time of construction, but as it relates to the anticipated receipt of the fees.
Well, maybe, Madam Mayor, may I ask a follow-up?
Certainly.
Mark, if this question is up for you, perhaps I could inquire of the city manager or Mr. Vaca, when are, or Mr. Colosso, when are traffic mitigation fees paid?
I would defer that to probably the public works side.
Yeah, I could go ahead and answer that. Right, collection of traffic mitigation fees are at the time of building permit, prior to building permit.
Okay.
So your comment exactly right as far as timing of construction is what that delay in a portion of that $1 million is not expected to receive that until next fiscal year. So
Okay,
yeah.
that helps me, Dave. Thanks very much. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Any other questions on this slide or on any of the others? Ms. Santangelo, did I see you nodding your head? No, okay. I don't think there are any other questions.
Okay, well, I think the next few slides are, I'm going to turn over to Mr. Klotzel in Public Works to talk about the CIP program update.
Ooh, big toys.
Yes, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Mayor and Council. We'll be giving an update here for the second quarter on our CIP projects. And yeah, as the pictures indicate, we did a little bit of paving in the last 6 months. You probably experienced some of that out there. And Earl Joseph Drive is nice and smooth, and we haven't received any complaints after that's been completed. So hopefully the brief inconveniences out there for our paving projects are long forgotten, and the enjoyment of driving on really nice streets in Camarillo is continues for a long time. So I'll be touching on recently completed projects, those that are under construction, and then a few selected projects that will be coming to council for action in the near future. Next slide, please. And this is a update in the same format that was presented at the first quarter update. And so really the top 5 projects are still there. They were on the list before, and these are in the closeout phase of projects that have been completed and waiting for the warranty period to be over. And then we'll be coming back to council in the next few months in the coming year to exonerate those securities that are in place for the warranty period of those projects. And then the remainder of the list, again, is other projects that have been recently completed. Las Posas Estates resurfacing, that was our cost for the streets that we, under agreement with the county, had them pave with their resurfacing project. The police department staff restroom project is completed. Again, that'll be coming back later this year, exonerate securities for that. And then audiovisual improvements for camera, improving the live streaming abilities in the city council chambers was completed also. So those are projects in the closeout and warranty phase. Next slide, please. And then on to projects that are currently in some phase of construction. Last step at City Council was award of the contract to the contractor, such as the Daily Drive sidewalk and gutter replacement project recently awarded. Construction has not started yet. It will be within the next month or so. The construction will be underway out there on Daily Drive. Of course, the desalter has been under construction for several months. over a year now, and continuing on in construction, wrapping up through this summer with startup and commissioning, and then testing and permitting, with the plan still on track for delivery of water by late summer, fall timeframe. Don't have an exact date yet at this point, but it's on track, on schedule. Conference Center Drain Project, and this is the one, the bulk of the work was to replace the open channel with the buried concrete box that's going through the Hotel Conference Center project. The drain work has been completed. The other portion of this project is the undergrounding of the overhead electrical lines that has been completed. And then there are some public improvements in the old Ventura right-of-way that the city is under agreement with the developer to reimburse for. So those are ongoing and expected to wrap up by the end of this year. We also have under construction, if you've seen any of the new sidewalk going in place there in the Mission Oaks area for replacement of the sidewalk, and then new street trees will be coming in soon as a part of that project as it continues into the summer. And then we have two resurfacing projects. The first one, ST 5020, is just getting going. That's the most recently awarded project. And then ST 5017 is the one where we did a lot of slurry sealing last year, in the middle and towards the end of last year. And the contractor will be coming back to make some repairs to several streets that need to be re-slurry sealed and some corrections made. We want to wait till weather improves so that project remains open and will be completed this summer. Work continues down at the treatment plant to replace some baffle walls in the aeration basin. That's underway, expected to be completed later this year. And recently awarded is a sewer improvements project where it's relining certain sections of our sewer system that have been identified that need to be rehabilitated with sewer lining projects. So that's getting ready to get started here, and we'll go through the summer. And then we're just getting started on rehabilitation at pump station number 3 for the sanitary district. And as I mentioned, those items will be coming back to council at the appropriate time. So next slide, please. In addition, wanted to touch on several other selected projects. We have quite a few other projects at various stages of conceptual design and final design. I wanted to highlight a few of those here, and they will be coming back to council for action in the near future. First on the list, the Camry Hills drain replacement that we discussed not too long ago with council. We'll be bringing a final design contract to council for award for a consultant to get going on final design on that. The Dizdar Park project, we are in final stages of that proposed contract for design, and we'll be bringing that back to council soon for that one. I wanted to point out too, some of these we do need to and have visited the funding situation, and there are some additional funds that will be needed as a part of this project to move into final design and then eventually construction. So that'll be a part of the council action. Similar situation with the Metrolink undercrossing. We're getting ready to award that preliminary engineering phase to a consultant. So that'll be coming to city council soon. And again, there's a small adjustment of increased funding for that project. The Pleasant Valley Road sewer force main project has been continuing on, and we'll be bringing back the next phase for preliminary engineering after our condition assessment project has recently wrapped up, and we'll be moving into preliminary engineering soon. And then the standby power city facilities project, that's where the solar and battery microgrid elements that we've recently discussed with council are going to be brought along further with the next step of bringing the consultant on board to continue with preliminary engineering and essentially queue the project up to be ready to move forward to the next stage of final design. And this project has quite a few different pieces and parts to it, and funding components. We've submitted applications through FEMA for grants at the various sites. And those applications have been submitted, and we anticipate hearing back on those grants by June or so of next year, and be able to make the decision. If a grant is awarded, there the improvements do need to go under a city-owned scenario rather than what we talked about before, a power purchase agreement or a PPA, which is essentially a third-party turnkey vehicle to have these improvements put in place. So what we're doing is proceeding forward with some preliminary design to queue it up to either go city-owned process or a PPA process, or it could be a possibility of a combination. We're dealing with the different needs of the different facilities. So it's a rather complex project that we're piecing together here. And when we come back to council, we'll have the full explanation of those possibilities and alternatives for further discussion with council before any further steps are taken on that project. And then lastly, as mentioned previously in Mark's presentation on the storm drain infrastructure repair project, we're asking to add that into our CIP and provide funding. And it is the source of funds for this type of work is general fund. And we have several locations that we've prepared preliminary design and are getting and need to move into the next stages for final design and construction on a couple of locations that really need to be repaired sooner than later. So that's the summary of those selected items, and be happy to answer any questions. I think that's the next slide, questions slide.
Any questions of Mr. Klotzel?
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Mulchay.
Dave, would you mind going back to the slide you were just on? For the Pleasant Valley Road sewer force main, staff had indicated that you guys were looking at alternatives to where that project could be potentially, and or the price could be scaled down. Do you have any update?
Yes, and that's actually, that update will be given when we come back for, considering an award of this preliminary engineering. So our initial step was to do some exploratory and a condition assessment of the pipeline that's out there. And through that process, taking a look at a prioritization approach to where it makes the most sense to add a second pipeline versus move forward into final design with a whole brand new pipeline down the entire stretch. And that's where that $18 million estimate comes from and has come from for the number of years that this has been in the CIP. As we've gone further in the project and what we're planning to do through the preliminary engineering phase is take a look at those critical locations where it would make sense to put in a secondary, a duplicate pipeline in case there is the need or in case a portion of the pipeline does fail, and then implement improvements to be able to bypass a temporary bypass and pump sewage if needed, if another section of the pipeline fails for some reason. So we're taking a more of a prioritization look at it to see exactly that. If likely, we likely won't end up with a construction project to replace the entire pipeline for that full stretch. Just looking at the high priority locations that will give us the protection needed in some of the more difficult spots. Say, for instance, at the railroad crossing, Pleasant Valley crosses the railroad. That would be one location where it would make a lot of sense to have a secondary pipeline in place in case there ever was a problem with that existing pipeline under the railroad, because to go in and do anything through the railroad takes a lot of time, and under emergency or urgency situation, it would be problematic. So that is one location, for example, where it makes sense to have a second pipeline available.
Okay, and then on standby power, two quick questions. You said you'd expect to hear back from FEMA June of next year. So you mean June of 2022?
No, this June. Sorry, yeah, this coming June.
Okay, yep. So June of 2021.
Yes.
And for standby power, staff had said when we last discussed this, you guys were going to continue to proceed on the diesel generators, right? And then we have the bigger project of the microgrid battery backup and solar.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, and we're continuing along that frame. Some of the grant what we're proposing to apply for the grant could affect that. So we're really ready right now to pull the trigger and finalize, go out to bid and construct those standby generators yet. We need to finalize the picture, so to speak, of how we're really going to be going forward once we know about the grants. And then, we're also pursuing other possible opportunities for funding for batteries. And yeah, it's like I said, there's quite a few different parts and pieces of the project that we're compiling together to move forward in the most cost-effective way.
So the generators are on standby until we hear back from FEMA.
In essence, right. And with all of the proposed projects, it includes the generator. It includes the generators. So, but how and when to implement those to make sure it doesn't mess anything up with the installation of the other items, solar and battery. We want to make sure all that's coordinated closely.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Tremblay.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Dave, 2 questions. Staying with this selected project PowerPoint slide on Distar Park, I know council, we already set aside funds relative to pursuing this project. You indicated that you anticipated that there would be additional funds needed. Can you give us an idea of what you think the scope of that might be?
Yeah, in terms of dollar amounts, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but where that comes from is since the last time we talked about this with council, we've moved into negotiations for the final design, and getting a better idea of what's going to be needed, especially for the CEQA document. It's likely going to be the EIR with the property and the history and the fire in the firehouse, and so that scope has expanded. So in terms of scope, that's definitely an expansion of what was previously, at the rough estimate stage. So additional cost for that scope, and then just refining what's going to be needed to accomplish the final design of all the parts and pieces of this. With the restrooms and the bandstand stage area. So
okay.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, can I follow up?
Certainly.
Then as part of the final design on that, or we'll get an engineering estimate?
of course, yes. Right, and that's we've already refined that even a little bit now as we've been preparing this final scope for design. Also, better estimating our construction, and then through final design, that'll be refined even further.
So I think with regard to this project, really your answer is kind of stay tuned. And I don't mean that in a negative way, just you're not quite sure yet.
Correct, yep, and we'll be bringing all that info to City Council relatively soon.
All right, and then Madam Mayor, on a couple more quick questions. On the Metrolink undercrossing project, and I guess apparently the council, you're going to bring that to council at the next meeting this month in terms of an award of preliminary engineering. Was the total project amount for that derived as a rough estimate at this point, or was that based on some specific hard estimating?
No, it's more of a rough estimate.
Okay, and secondly, what do you anticipate would be let me phrase it this way. Would you anticipate that there would be multiple sources of funding for that project?
Yes.
Could you describe what those might be?
Sure. Yeah. The bulk of that is the grant that the city's of this project is a piece of, and that was through I believe it was actually a piece of SB1 funding for specific rail. I can't remember the exact term of the category. SB1 had numerous categories of funding, and one specifically for rail. This grant was actually applied for in jointly with LOSAN, the entire LOSAN group. So really from their territory from north of here all the way down to San Diego, with quite a few different projects, and this project being one of them. With grant funding, I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but I think it's around the $6 million figure of grant funds from SB1. And
okay.
then we also have in our traffic mitigation fee program, we have this project identified for traffic mitigation funding.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Your Honor, if I may.
Mr. Kildee?
Yeah, Dave, could I follow up on that, on the Metrolink? Are we still actively pursuing some more opportunities for any grant funding or any other funding that may become available?
There's nothing active in the works right now for funding there. Of course, if anything does come up, we would definitely pursue whatever might be available.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
About that project, it's kind of, we're going to have to move forward with it because if we pull out, nobody gets their grant. We've had that discussion before.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Tremblay.
can I respond to Councilmember Kildee? And that is that, you know, since I represent the council on the VCTC board, I think it's fair to say that there will be a lot of additional discussions going forward on how to make that project move forward, Mr. Kildee.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're not discussing the project, but I think it's going to take up way too much of that parking lot, but that's just me. Any other questions on the budget matters? Okay, Mr. Uribe.
Okay,
I think
thank
the
you.
next slide was questions and then we go
Yes.
on.
Just a couple more slides here, we're almost done. That basically completes the presentation. As to summarize, that all the significant adjustments as of December 31st have been recommended. And the general fund budget is operationally balanced. It means outside of these one-time revenues, one-time savings, without all of those items, we would still be balanced in the general fund. And staff will continue to monitor the economic conditions as they relate to city operations. And we have the third quarter budget review scheduled for April 21st, where we can update on any other significant trends or new information that we are aware of at that date. So on these suggested actions, number one is to approve the fiscal year 2021 mid-year budget report and authorize city manager to adjust the fiscal year 2021 budget and make necessary appropriations. Based on city attorney's comments, we will ignore number two with the adjustments that were not part of the agenda report. And the last one is to authorize the additional storm drain infrastructure repair project, SD 5116, to the capital improvement program for fiscal year, the 5-year CIP program, 2020 through 25.
So the suggested action is to exactly the same as it is in the agenda of both the Kamsan District Board and the City Council. Is that correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, I have a question.
Mr. Kildee?
Do we have to take these separately or can we combine 1 and 3?
We can combine 1 and 3, but I think we need to have a separate vote with Mr. Tremblay under Kamsan.
Mayor Craven, before you move to actions, I would suggest you ask if anybody from the public has any comments.
Okay, but are there any other questions or questions, especially from City Council members?
I had a couple of comments, Madam Mayor, whenever it's appropriate.
Okay, well, before comments, let's take questions from, or comments from the public, but no, I see no other hands going up from the council. So I will ask if any member of the public has any comments on the budget item. This is not the time for regular public comments, it's simply on this item. I see no hands going up. If a member of the public would like to ask to comment on this, please raise your hand. I see none going up. So I will now ask for council comments.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Tremblay.
Yeah, I'll just say this is a very good report. I think both in presentation and in terms of results. I want to compliment Mr. Uribe and the Finance Department staff. I think our staff report was easily readable, easy to follow. And again, I want to compliment them on that. I think particularly in this environment, particularly with COVID-19 pandemic budgeting, it's a very difficult thing to do. And so I think our finance department has done very well. I also think, looking at the budget, it really shows the value of what this city has done in terms of conservative budgeting practices and including very healthy revenues. So I'm very happy with that. I thought Mr. Mulchey's question earlier as to the general fund Q2 revenues was a really appropriate question, and I'm looking forward to seeing those numbers as they come in. But I'm also aware, I think that staff has said that they're confident in that adjustment. So with that, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Other council members, comments? Mrs. Santangelo.
Yeah, I want to echo Mr. Trembley's comments. It really is a pleasure to sit down with a complicated staff report and be able to read it and really understand it and have it make sense. So I appreciate that. I also really appreciate the fact that when this all started, that we decided to be very careful and to be conservative and to estimate things almost worst case scenario, because now we're in a position where we're pleasantly surprised that things weren't as bad as they could have been. So, so yeah, no, I just, I was pleased with both the presentation of the report, but also the content, and I'm really happy at where we are, and just want to thank Mr. Uribe and the entire finance department.
Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, I just want to echo what my two colleagues have said. I think if you'd asked at least myself here 6 months ago what the budget was going to look like, I probably couldn't have answered that question, and I certainly couldn't have answered it the way that it's been presented tonight. I thank the staff for the presentation, and I don't know, we've all learned a lot going through this, and I've certainly learned that technology has really helped us in a lot of situations this year too. So that's what I mean by online sales and Zoom meetings and various other things that's happened here too that has allowed us to stay afloat. So I commend the staff and the council members and the public too for sticking with us here. And I truly believe that better days are ahead of us. So those are my comments at this point. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Mulchey.
In keeping with the spirit of what everyone else said, I'll echo my colleagues' comments. Hats off to finance staff, Mr. Uribe, and all the staff, really, the city. Everyone's pulled a lot of weight in this last year. I will echo Mr. Trembley's statements in that this is in part a result of good conservative fiscal management and budgeting practices. Although these are difficult times, I think this shows that the city is still on good, strong financial footing. So, and that's to be applauded and appreciated. Thanks.
I have a few comments. I agree. This was a very good report, both with what it said and the way it was said. It's very understandable, and also it has good numbers. I have a couple of other comments. I think that these numbers show that we were prudent in budgeting even more conservatively than usual. However, we didn't go into panic mode as some other cities had to do because of the way we have budgeted and had reserves in the past. But it was still good to have the money coming from the federal government through the state for various things in the CARES Act. And I also want to point out that because we are a contract city, we were able to save almost $1 million on the library, which was not able to be open at all. But if those employees had been direct hires, we wouldn't have saved that money because they'd still be around. And so unless we had had a riff at the library or something. But I think that's one of the advantages of being a contract city. So with those comments, is there a motion for the city for the two suggested items?
I'll move the suggested items 1 and 2.
Second.
The motion.
And okay, Ms. Santangelo made the motion, Mr. Trembley seconded. And those are the two items in the agenda. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Kildee,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tremblay,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Molche,
Yes.
Mayor Craven.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimous.
Okay, Mr. Tremblay.
Madam Mayor, then let me ask for on behalf of the Camarillo Sanitary District Board of Directors, may I ask for a motion relative to the suggested items 1 and 2 in the CAMSAN agenda?
I'll
Move
move to
approval
suggest
of
action
items
for
1 and
items
2.
1 through. It's killed.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, I think I heard Mr. Kildee make the motion, and was it Ms. Santangelo do the second?
I
Oh,
did the second.
it was Madam Mayor. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Director Craven,
Yes.
Director Kildee,
Yes.
Director Molche,
Yes.
Secretary Santangelo,
Yes.
Chair Tremblay.
Yes.
That motion carries unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I think in order to adjourn the CAMSAN meeting, I just need to ask whether there are any comments from staff or board members. May I do so at this time?
No comments from staff.
Any comments from board members? Hearing none, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District Board of Directors and turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. And we will go on to new business, oral communications and informational items, which do not require action. Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor, no comments at this time.
Mr. City Attorney.
I have no comments tonight.
Okay, City Council. Ms. Santangelo.
Okay, I'll
We're
go.
smiling.
Okay, meetings attended, goal session on February 3rd. That's all I have to report for that. I wanted to just talk a little bit about vaccinations. I know I'm sensing COVID vaccinations. I guess I should clarify. I'm sensing a lot of frustration in the community, and I understand that. But it was really interesting to be on the elected officials call this morning and hear actually that in terms of vaccinations delivered, we are one of the best in the state with our rates. And I also, I'm hoping to just kind of go down a few things that people understand that we don't really have any control over how many vaccine doses are sent to public health from the state. They can request, but they get what they get. And it's generally been between about 10,000 and 12,000 doses a week. So they're doing their very best to keep up with what comes in and opening up appointments when they have more. And just, I mean, I was kind of blown away by this. This morning they said current appointments. So right now they have a lot more people making appointments for their second dose than the first dose. But so right now they have 12,336 appointments made for the first dose. There's 43,488 appointments for the second dose. I mean, just think about the amount of people that they are getting in, getting a shot to, and getting out. So it's really a massive operation. There are going to be some improvements coming. You know, aside from what the state is getting to our county, pharmacies are now stocked with vaccines, so you can always try signing up with your local pharmacies. And there's going to be a new platform called My Turn that is going to help improve the appointment scheduling. So look for that to come. I think somebody can correct me if they were on the call this morning. I believe maybe next week it may be up and running. Something also that I thought was really interesting, because a lot of people have asked this and I didn't know the answer. You can get your first and your second doses at a different place. So if you had your first dose out at the fairgrounds, you can go get your second dose at a pharmacy as long as it's the same manufacturer. So if you start with Pfizer, you have to finish with Pfizer. You can't mix those up. And also, I thought was interesting that the CDC does say that you can wait up until 6 weeks for that second dose. So there is some leeway in getting that booster. So don't freak out if you don't get that appointment right at the 28 or the 21 day, depending on your vaccine. There is some leeway that CDC says will still enable you to get the full effect of the vaccines. So, you know, I know we all want to be protected and we want to get back to being able to be out and about. But I think the county is working really hard. And I think we just need to be patient and keep checking the appointments. Camarillo, they are adding 2 more sites, Oxnard this week, and there will be a site in Camarillo starting, they believe, February 18th. That'll be at Ventura County Office of Education on Adolfo Road. So look for that. And I think that's enough on that. Also remember, I will plug this, that even if you are vaccinated, you still have to wear a mask. You still have to do all the hand hygiene. We still have to watch gatherings and try to avoid crowds. The vaccines prevent you from getting really sick, but they do not prevent you from transmitting. So we really still, until we get enough of us that are vaccinated, we still need to be using all of those precautions. And the last thing I wanted to say is that February is Black History Month. You know, a lot of people still ask why we celebrate Black History Month. And it's about highlighting the lasting contributions of Black men and women in our society. And it's important that we highlight these achievements and accomplishments because it motivates, it educates, and it helps to inspire younger Black men and women that they too can have similar achievements and accomplishments. And so it's really important to see the major Black men and women who have been an integral part of American history. So I hope that everybody out there takes some time to really think about how Black men and women have helped to shape our country, the work that we still have to do. And I know that I will celebrate and honor these people and always remember that we do have a lot of work to do, and I'm committed to do it, and I hope everybody else is too. And with that, that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Tremblay.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just in terms of meetings attended, our February 3rd Council Goals and Objectives session, February 5, VCTC board meeting, and February 8, a Fox Canyon GMA special board meeting. Just a couple of quick things. I think, and I want to ask Susan this, I think, Susan, that my turn registration, I believe it's supposed to start February 16th, if that sounds familiar, but it's be next week, I think.
Yeah,
early next week.
That's what I thought.
Right? Okay, and the Camarillo site will at least I know be the Ventura County Office of Education on Verdugo Way. One thing that I've been particularly concerned about and advocating on behalf of homebound and medically fragile seniors is that the county, County Public Health, which is doing a good job in very difficult circumstances, consider mobile vaccination units. And I know that is under consideration, but I haven't seen anything on that yet. And I don't know that there was any update on that during today's call, which unfortunately I couldn't make. Was there anything on that in terms of an update? Okay, thank you.
Didn't hear anything about that.
Okay, and then I'll just reiterate what you've already asked of folks to do in terms of please continue to comply with public health guidelines. You know, it's really being in Vaughn's the other day. It is unusual now that I see someone without a mask. I don't know what everyone else's experience is, but I think the compliance rate on mask and now doing a double mask is very, very high, and that is a good thing to see. So we need to continue, despite the vaccination schedule moving forward, continuing to undertake those precautions that CDC and public health have prescribed. That's it for me, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kildee.
Let's see, meetings, attended the goal session study and a VRSD. And also I'd like to thank the council members, Ms. Santangelo and Mr. Tremblay, for talking about the COVID. And I really encourage everybody, along with all of us, to get their shot. It's really, really important. Had a really good report about several people that I know that actually received their shot at the fairgrounds. Said it was extremely well organized. And one person said they were in and out in, I think, 45 minutes, which is pretty incredible. So they really got this down. And it's really encouraging to see how organized they are. Also, I'm not plugging a channel, but sometimes I watch Channel 5 and they're doing a really good job about Black History Month. That they're actually having several African-American individuals throughout the years and what the accolades and what they've done to really benefit our country. So they do that. I watch it almost every night, and to my knowledge, every night they come out with another individual for the Black History Month. So it's really well done. And with that, I don't have any other comments. I do have a question. It'll have to be answered tonight. I know it's going to be perhaps an agendized item, and I know in the future, but I'd like to know when we can anticipate our library reopening. I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but maybe at a future meeting, if maybe they'd have a little bit of an update on that. So with that, that's all I have.
Mr. Mulchay.
All right. Meetings attended was just last Wednesday's February 3rd, the goal study session with all of you. I do want to, Mr. Tremblay, Ms. Santangelo said most of what I had planned to say on COVID. I do want to add a plug when it comes to the updates coming from the city's newsletter. For anyone who's wanting to have updates, COVID updates, whether who's eligible, where to register, the planned vaccine location that Susan had mentioned, the vaccine dashboard that was also mentioned, managed through the county. The city gives updates to all those. You can get them in your email inbox. Go to the city's website. If you're on the desktop computer, on the left-hand side, scroll down, second button on the left, you'll see a notify me email alert. Click that, register. You can register for whatever kind of information you want to receive, whether it's COVID or other. But it's really useful, and it's a great little tool if you feel like you're not getting more targeted information as it might pertain to you in the city of Camarillo. So it's a terrific resource, and I encourage people to use it. Thank you Susan, thank you for bringing up Black History Month. I'll let your words stand in for what anything I would have said. I think it was very well said. The one thing I do want to mention is, someone had mentioned this maybe a few meetings ago, the yellow borders that you may see in some other cities, particularly I think Westlake and or Agora Hills I've seen lately. There are yellow borders around streetlights. I think this might be a project with Caltrans or in partnership with Caltrans. I see them mainly coming off of like freeways and whatnot, intersections there. But I would like to refer to the Transportation Infrastructure Committee to look at that and explore whether some of those might be appropriate for certain intersections. Mr. Tremblay.
Mr. Tremblay.
Madam Mayor, thank you. I think, Mr. Mulchay, thanks for mentioning that. I think that could be Caltrans, but I think it's also City of Thousand Oaks that is doing that. And I was the one who brought it up. And Madam Mayor, if I may, and sorry, Mr. Mulchay, thank you again, Susan, with respect to your comments on Black History Month. I was going to say Channel 4 was doing the same thing. So I guess we all watch different television channels, but anyway, it was well said. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for letting me interrupt you, Sean.
So if we could refer that, I guess I just need a second, but refer that, looking
I'll
into
second that.
Okay.
I see a third.
Okay. The infrastructure and transportation.
Mr. Tremblay.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And that's all I had.
Okay, I've got a lot tonight. I Zoomed parts of the CASA virtual conference, as well as the CASA State Ledge Committee and some of the contract cities virtual conferences, which was spread over 4 weeks. And a virtual legislative committee meeting of the contract cities. I also virtually attended an RDP board meeting and a monthly meeting and the city's goal setting session. And today in person, I joined some staff members in going out and handing out the city longevity awards that we didn't do in December. So it was really nice to hand those out to people who had been with the city for anywhere from 5 years in 5-year increments up to one who's been with the city for 35 years. And that's always a really nice presentation. I want to remind people that we are in a drought. So far this year, we have gotten 2.5 inches of rain. As of the end of January, the average is 7.5. I am really hoping for a miracle March, but not such a miracle that we're going to have rocks and debris slides. Something in the middle, but we really need more rain this year, and it's just not coming. I noticed that at least 3 channels on the news last night were predicting, oh, we're going to have rain tonight. Tomorrow morning, and the little dribbles that were out on the louvers of my patio cover, I don't count as rain. I count that as heavy dew. So I don't know if they've changed the definition of rain or what, but we certainly didn't have what they predicted. I want to say that the county has changed its method of registering for the COVID shots. The current method, as of yesterday and today, are a little bit easier than the one 3-4 weeks ago. I'm not getting special consideration. I'm over the age of 75, so I was able to sign up. And the first one was very, very cumbersome. The second one, they gave better instructions, and you can zip back a lot easier if the first location you chose was not available. You had to go back and start over, but it wouldn't let you start over unless you actually closed it out. Now there's a way to go back and start over and look at a different location. I'm hoping that the newer version that's coming out will be even more user friendly, because I found the first one particularly bothersome. And then when I signed up for my second vaccine, it was a lot easier. My husband signed up today, and it was still easier. So they're getting there. They're getting there. And I do want to remind people that in order to go to these places, you need a reservation. I have some comments for the council regarding the goals session that we had last regular meeting last week. And I've got to make some comments because I think that last week I didn't really make them clear. Goals and objectives are really lofty things. They're kind of up in the air. They're telling council, they're telling staff a direction to work toward. And sometime during these are goals for the next fiscal year. Sometime during that fiscal year, they will, from objectives, they will bring us information on how they plan to implement that objective. They will bring us information to see if we want to put it into a subsequent budget, which is not the next year's budget, but a further out budget, an out year budget. And I think that in looking at some of the things we discussed and introduced as budget items, as objectives, the council members were thinking that those were going to be discussed and implemented in the fiscal year 2021 budget. Those items are really the things that should have gone onto the projects list. And I want to give you some two examples. Susan had asked under community relations as an objective to explore a community mobile-based, no, sorry. Under community redevelopment, Susan had asked, proposed an objective that we adopted to encourage the development of appropriate infill housing projects that include affordable housing opportunities to address the housing crisis in our area. That's a pretty lofty thing. It doesn't have one specific project attached with a specific cost. So that's a good objective. On the other hand, under community relations, we added another objective: explore a community mobile-based application similar to See Click Fix for establishing a more transparent and collaborative system for ease of reporting and tracking public works or city code matters needing attention and resolution. Now that's really a request for specific software or software similar to something. And it appeared to me, going back, that Sean had wanted that discussion for the upcoming budget year. So that really is something that should have been on the projects list. So I have asked staff to not put our objectives that we kind of finalized at the last meeting, not to put them on the consent calendar as is often done, but to put them on under either city council or city manager so that we can discuss these and look at them, and each of us decide if we would like that item put under the things we added put under the projects list. Because I think the expectation might be different explaining what the two are. Anyway, I don't know that we need to discuss that now. It's just something that an observation I made. And that's all I have. We have 25 minutes. We have fewer than 25 minutes before the 7 o'clock session. So I think it would be better for us to take a break, have a bite to eat, go to the bathroom, whatever we need, and then go back to the closed session after the open session, which simply consists of public comments.
Madam
Madam
Mayor,
Mayor?
this is
Yes.
City Manager. We still have the 7:30 agenda this evening. We do not go to 7 p.m. until 2 weeks from now on the 24th.
Oh, that's right. I apologize.
We do have time to recess back into closed session before that 7:30 agenda.
Okay. Well, let's take a short break before we go in. We've been at it since 4:30. And what do we say at 10 till 7? We go back into closed session. And I don't believe we need to repeat. The city attorney has already announced the conditions under which we were going into closed session. So at 10 till, we'll do that. In the meantime, we will recess until 7:30.
All right. Am I on good? Okay, I think I am.
Okay, the longest minute. Okay, it's 7:30, so I will now call the city council back to order. The first thing I'm going to do is close the special meeting that was opened at 4:30 and report that we made no decisions in closed session. So I'll reopen the regular city council meeting and ask the record to reflect that all council members are present. The only thing on the agenda tonight is public comments. We have, I see one hand up. If any other member of the public would like to speak to us on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand. And the speaker time is 3 minutes. I will give each speaker 3 minutes and then we'll ask you to please close. So the first speaker I have is Matthew Wayne Lorimer.
Hi, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, well, thank you. This is Matt Lorimer. I have 3 comments tonight. The first comment I want to say is we need to respect people. You know, I've had disagreements with council members or wherever we have disagreements with speakers or people across the nation, but we should never call people names online or disrespect people. So I do respect the council members. We disagree, but let's be civil online and around the world on that topic. Number 2, I seriously believe we need a police substation and a bike patrol. You know, we've had a couple murders. Prevention is worth saving people's lives, and prevention does work. And I hope the council will look at some preventative measures. There's a lot coming down the pipeway. The next thing I want to talk about is the word that constantly is being used to city council during developments, housing crisis. That's not true. If you go to realtor.com, that's only one site. Oxnard has 208,000 people. It has 260 homes for sale. It has 220 apartments. Thousand Oaks has 341 homes for sale, and it has a population of 127,000, and it has 313 apartments. Camarillo has 207 homes for sale on Realtor.com. On apartments, it basically has 174. Now, Camarillo has about 68,200. The point is very simple. If you're a councilman and you keep saying a housing crisis and you look online, that's not true. In fact, Camarillo has a glut of houses. The reason why there's a need in Camarillo, basically, is because the jobs are not there. For years, we've talked about on council during elections, we're not growing businesses. There is plenty of housing. So to say there's a housing crisis is not correct. Remember, this is Realtor.com, folks. If you Google, that's one site. There are plenty of homes in Camarillo. The idea that you have to take a development of 300 homes so you can get 12 affordable homes doesn't make sense. But this has been sold as a tool for a long time by council members and staff. Is it a way to grow the city budget so the retirement packages are kept? Who knows? But these are deciding factors. But again, in life, it's important that we look at it. We are not in a housing crisis. If you look online, the facts are very clear. Please, when you say there's a housing crisis, check for yourself, citizens, because the facts don't represent the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lorimer. I don't see any other hands raised. Is there any other member of the public who would like to speak to the council on an item not on the agenda? Which isn't hard to do because we have completed our agenda. Okay, seeing no more hands and there being no further business, I will adjourn this meeting.